If you're not a ruggedly handsome guy with chiseled muscles and haven't achieved success in life, women won't pay attention to you. The world is unfair, and any effort is futile. All troubles come from women. They are the ones to blame for your loneliness. These aren't just the words of a resentful man. They are the principles on which the entire ideology of incels is based. Who are incels? And what connection do they have to the bloody tragedy that unfolded in Canada in 2018? We'll find out today. Help this channel grow. Like the video, try the new hype feature, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories. This helps us a lot. Thank you. Incels, mostly men, who are unable to find a romantic or sexual partner despite a strong desire to do so. Incels place the entire blame for their involuntary celibacy on women. They feel rejected, not only by the opposite sex, but by society as a whole. In fact, this movement was founded by a Canadian woman named Alana, who created the Alana's Involuntary Celibacy Project. But it was soon taken over by men who believed they were entitled to an intimate life and were angry that women weren't providing it. A 22-year-old virgin, Elliot Rodger, became a sort of symbol for incels after he took the lives of 6 people at the University of California, Santa Barbara in 2014. He explained his crimes as an act of revenge against the women who rejected him and showed him indifference. In a video he posted shortly before the attack, Elliot said he had never even been kissed. According to Rodger, college is a time when everyone experiences things like sex, fun, and pleasure. But during those years, he had to rot in loneliness. It's unfair. Girls were never attracted to him, and for that, he would punish them all. Unfortunately, Elliot Rodger was able to carry out his sinister plan. 6 people died, after which the perpetrator took his own life. Most people sympathized with the victims' families, but there were those who praised Elliot's series of crimes. The main figure in today's story, named Alek Minassian, wasn't just a member of the online incel community. Alek was friends with Elliot Rodger. As the saying goes, tell me who your friend is, and I'll tell you who you are. As it would later become clear, nothing good came from this friendship. Minassian, despite his friend's death, was deeply inspired by his bloody act and wanted to continue the incel uprising. Alek Minassian was born on November 3, 1992, in Richmond Hill, Canada, near Toronto. He lived with his parents and older brother. Alek's childhood was spent in a comfortable environment. His father had immigrated from Armenia to Canada and worked as a software developer, while his mother was from Iran and worked at an IT company. The family bought a beautiful house in the suburbs and was quite happy. However, for Alek, things weren't so simple. As a child, he was described as a somewhat strange kid. Alek was very quiet, very sensitive, but he struggled to understand social cues. The boy avoided eye contact and couldn't carry on a conversation. Alek felt awkward in social settings because he didn't know how to communicate. He never mastered this skill, even as an adult. When Alek started school, he couldn't fit in with his peers. He often played alone on the playground and never talked to other kids in class. When a teacher addressed him, the schoolboy would get very angry because he didn't like the attention. He didn't want teachers asking him questions or making him answer in front of the whole class. Standing at the blackboard while everyone watched and giving a presentation was his worst nightmare. To avoid this, the boy would stand up and bolt out of the classroom door. Alek also hated being praised. He generally didn't accept any form of attention, whether good or bad. Worst of all, the schoolboy not only didn't know how to interact with other kids, he didn't want to. His parents also had a hard time. When Alek didn't get what he wanted, he threw tantrums. Sometimes he would run off and bang his head against the wall, and this child was completely unable to smile, let alone laugh. He saw difficulties in everything, and life itself seemed like one endless ordeal to Alek. After years of struggling with their son's behavior, his parents took him to a doctor. Alek was diagnosed with pervasive developmental disorder. This is an outdated psychiatric diagnosis given to children who exhibit some, but not all, signs of autism spectrum disorder or Asperger's syndrome. In middle school, Alek attended classes for children with autism, but it didn't help much. In high school, the young man still faced challenges, particularly with socialization. He continued to struggle greatly with communicating with classmates. This led to bullying and harassment. Other students didn't like that Alek was different, not like them. He became a target for bullies, students who disregarded accepted norms of behavior and didn't try to understand his situation. The bullying intensified even more when Alek displayed physical quirks. For example, he would sometimes shake violently, rock back and forth, constantly touch something, or tap his head or some surface. Alek also had a habit of spitting on his hands and rubbing them together. Sometimes he would lift his shirt, pull it over his head, and spit into it. This greatly irritated and amused other kids. Another physical quirk was that Alek would walk around people and start growling or meowing, then try to bite them. Because of this behavior, the young man was teased and called Chewbacca from Star Wars. Other students laughed at him, but Alek couldn't understand why. He couldn't read social cues and thought his classmates liked it when he meowed or growled at them, so he tried to do it as often as possible. The teasing grew even worse. It was a vicious cycle. His nickname Chewbacca stuck so much that many students at school didn't even know his real name. Throughout his school years, Alek was isolated from society and felt very lonely. He had no friends. In class, Minassian was a loner. Coming home after school, he was alone again in his room. Later, another problem emerged: girls. In high school, Alek not only couldn't talk to female classmates, he could barely look in their direction. If a girl looked at Alek or tried to talk to him, he would freeze in place and shut down, not knowing what to do. When other students discussed which girls they liked, Alek didn't know what to say. He felt awkward, and this again drew his classmates' attention. So, the topic of relationships with girls became yet another reason to bully Alek. Under the threat of beatings, he was forced to approach girls. Minassian would approach female classmates and start blushing, stuttering, and getting embarrassed. This amused the entire class, but for Alek, it became another school nightmare. It got to the point where he simply became afraid of women, associating them with the bullying. It became normal for him to rock back and forth and mutter under his breath that he didn't like girls. Whenever a female classmate approached him, Alek would jump back and yell for her not to hurt him. His fear of girls was so deep that it extended far beyond school. If the Minassian family went to a restaurant and the server was a woman who asked Alek what he wanted to order, the young man would just freeze silently, not knowing how to respond. All the social experience Alek gained in school consisted of constant mockery and humiliation. When he finally graduated from high school, he was over the moon with joy because the more he was bullied, the more he withdrew into himself. Alek hardly left the house, as he was afraid of the outside world. And since he spent so much time at home, locked in his room, the young man turned to video games. The internet became his entire world, a source of comfort. It was the only way Alek could interact with other people, because he was in the comfort and safety of his own home. This obsession with communicating online would later play a role in the case, but in a much darker way. Alek's fascination with the internet and video games later led him to pursue a degree in computer programming. Minassian enrolled in a college in Toronto, close to his family's home. The young man started attending classes and excelled academically. Computers were his salvation, something he was great at. Alek still struggled to communicate with classmates, but now he was in his element. He could talk about programming and computers for hours. In college, he even made some friends who shared his interests. Minassian was such a diligent student that he began helping other students in his class. Studying at the university brought him satisfaction for the first time. He enjoyed life and gradually gained confidence. Now Alek could calmly raise his hand, answer teachers' questions, and speak in front of an audience. After what he had endured in high school, This was a major achievement. Several years passed, and things were going better and better for Alek, but then, at some point, his life went downhill again, and the reason was girls. In October 2013, Alek Minassian was in his third year of college. He was a few weeks away from turning 21. All he could think about now was girls and relationships with them. Although Alek had made friends and his social skills had improved, when it came to interacting with the opposite sex, he still got lost. During his time in college, Alek had glimmers of hope. At one point, he mustered the courage to ask a female classmate for her phone number. She gave it to him, but when Alek texted her, she didn't respond. All his good mood instantly vanished. This was a real blow for the young man. Despite this, at the end of October, Alek went to a Halloween party, determined to meet a beautiful girl and even try to flirt. Gathering his courage, he approached a group of girls. When they noticed him, they started laughing for some reason. Alek felt shame and embarrassment when a group of guys appeared, tall, muscular, and very attractive according to Alek. The girls approached them and started touching their muscles. The group was joking and flirting with each other, paying no further attention to Minassian. In the end, he left the party very angry. At that moment, he felt the world was unfair. Why were girls only attracted to arrogant, jacked-up guys and not someone like Alek, kind, smart, and polite? Why did they always laugh at him? All he wanted was to flirt, to be hugged and kissed. After leaving that party, Alek kept thinking about the unfairness of life. He replayed these thoughts over and over in his head, and it became a pivotal moment for him because his views on women changed radically, turning negative. It was this unfortunate party that pushed Alek to become an incel. Minassian dove headfirst into the internet, searching for people with similar problems, people who were frustrated that girls never paid them attention, didn't want to date them or go out with them. That's when he stumbled upon incel forums. As mentioned earlier, incels define themselves as those who desperately desire intimate relationships but cannot find a romantic partner. They believe they are forced to remain celibate against their will. In recent years, the term incel has been associated with young people who hold highly destructive and dangerous views about society in general, and women in particular. They want to take revenge for their disappointments, to hurt people. Their overarching ideology is that society is broken, unfairly treats incels, and that women are only interested in wealthy, successful, attractive young men. Incels even have their own terminology, dividing people into several categories. According to them, only 20% of men are attractive and successful chads, meaning sexually desirable. They are pursued by Stacies, young, attractive girls and women who passionately want to be with chads. Incels wholeheartedly hate chads and Stacies, envying the former and desiring intimacy with the latter, but unable to attain it, as Stacies are only interested in chads. The rest are normies, ordinary people of average attractiveness and income who occupy the middle of the hierarchy. Incels also hate normies because they, too, don't want to engage in intimate relationships with them. Incels themselves are at the bottom of the hierarchical ladder, the omega or beta males, the lowest tier. Incels believe women only choose alpha males and ignore others. No one wants to be intimate with incels, neither Stacies nor normies. Most incels don't strive to change themselves, believing any effort is futile because the world is inherently unfair. They don't think the problem lies within themselves. They blame it all on their appearance. Incels believe they have a right to physical intimacy, but in today's world, women have too many choices. Of course, they blame the opposite sex entirely, especially feminists. According to members of the online incel community, women should be distributed equally among everyone, but the cool guys take them for themselves. Women should, essentially, accept their lot and stay silent, not choose the best among men. Incels go so far as to say that every day a woman denies them intimacy is, in fact, a form of reverse assault. as dangerous and destructive to a man as actual violence. However, hatred toward women and aggressive rhetoric are only the visible part of the problem. Under the guise of incel principles, real crimes have been committed. It was on such internet forums that Alek Minassian stumbled. There, he found like-minded individuals and quickly immersed himself in the world of incels and their ideology. In January 2014, Alek came across a post that caught his attention. It was written by none other than Elliot Rodger, the Supreme Gentleman, as he called himself, who would later commit a mass crime. Minassian was so moved by Elliot's words that he sent him a private message, and the two young men developed a fairly close relationship. Alek felt he truly understood and empathized with Elliot and the struggles he had faced. Although Rodger lived in the US and Minassian in Canada, they wanted to meet in person. Alek admired his new friend. 4 months later, Elliot started sending Alek cryptic messages saying he was going on an important mission but wasn't sure if he'd return alive, and that many incels supported him and were calling for an uprising. Minassian wished his friend luck. 3 days later, on May 23, 2014, 22-year-old Elliot Rodger carried out a series of attacks in California, killing 6 people and injuring 14 others. Before committing the mass shooting, Elliot posted a manifesto online detailing all his life's problems. He explained his actions as a desire to punish women for rejecting him and successful men for their status. After Elliot's suicide, some communities began to revere him as a martyr, a hero. After all, everything he did was for incels. This was the beginning of the uprising. Alek Minassian himself said he was proud of Elliot and what he had done. The young man became increasingly immersed in the incel community. A year later, in 2015, Alek began corresponding with another incel named Chris Harper Mercer, and it turned out that Chris would become another mass perpetrator. In the fall of 2015, Chris Harper Mercer was fed up with his life. He had no girlfriend and didn't even hope to find one. He was so inspired by Elliot Rodger's actions that he acquired a firearm and carried out a mass shooting known as the Umpqua Community College shooting in Roseburg, Oregon. On October 1, 2015, Harper Mercer killed 9 people and injured another 9 on campus before taking his own life. And this was another guy Alek was friends with. Watching the fame and honor his 2 friends received in the incel community, Minassian began dreaming of something similar. He wanted to be seen as a hero and elevated to a pedestal of glory. Alek wanted to overthrow Chads and Stacys and create a just society where incels would finally take their rightful place in the world. He couldn't stop fantasizing about an incel uprising, and he was drawn deeper and deeper into this toxic world. Over the last 6 years since starting college, Alek had many ups and downs. He studied at the university for a couple of years, then dropped out and got a job. After being fired, Minassian returned to college, only to drop out again. His parents were tired of their son's behavior. He didn't want to take responsibility for his future and set no clear goals for himself. Alek still lived at home, with no prospects of getting a good job or even finishing college. That's when his parents convinced him to join the army. However, a place like the army was hardly the best fit for Alek. Nevertheless, he passed the entrance exams with flying colors and, for the first time, left his parents' home, moving to Quebec for military training. The young man tried his best to build relationships with other recruits, but the unfamiliar pace of life took a toll on his physical condition. During training, Alek constantly fell and stumbled. His nervous tic became more noticeable, and it distracted others. Minassian couldn't process information, didn't understand instructions, and couldn't perform even basic tasks like making his bed, keeping his clothes in order, or polishing his shoes. Due to his lack of self-discipline, Alek constantly lagged behind, causing problems for his platoon. Naturally, this behavior caused dissatisfaction, and other recruits began to badmouth and insult Alek behind his back. The bullying started again. No one understood how he had even passed the entrance exam to get into the training program. The training center's leadership decided they couldn't entrust Alek Minassian with a firearm if he couldn't even make his bed or meet basic requirements. It was clear to everyone that this guy was not cut out for the army. After 16 days at the military training center, Alek caught tonsillitis and was sent home. After his failed attempt to join the army, the young man's resentment toward the world's unfairness only grew stronger. Discharged from the armed forces, Alek returned to college at age 25. He had only one semester left before he could earn his diploma. However, Alek returned to college a completely different person. His brief military experience had changed him, making him more volatile and aggressive. Before, he was so withdrawn and awkward in communication that he couldn't talk to anyone normally. But now he started arguing with other students and getting into fights. Alek told one classmate he left the army because they didn't let him use weapons as often as he wanted. During his final semester in college, Minassian sank deeper and deeper into the incel community. He was 25 years old and had never been on a date with a girl. He was angry at the world for ignoring him. He was tired of constantly being rejected. And now Alek Minassian wanted to become a legend in the incel community, like Elliot Rodger and Chris Harper Mercer, and he planned how best to achieve that. On April 19, 2018, Alek finally graduated from college, earning his diploma after 7 years, and soon after he put his horrific plan into action. On April 22, 2018, Alek went to an incel forum and wrote that tomorrow would be the beta male uprising. He called on other incels to join the rebellion and overthrow the unjust society. Many praised Alek, and he liked the attention. One user wrote that he also had a plan to stage a beta uprising in November 2018. Fortunately, that plan turned out to be an empty threat. But Alek Minassian was serious. He genuinely believed that incels needed to fight back and take revenge for their failed lives, which he later did. Around noon on April 23, 2018, Alek arrived at a Ryder truck rental location in Toronto. The young man decided to rent a vehicle to carry out his plan because he had no way to buy a firearm. A couple of weeks before the set date, he reserved a van, intending to use it as a deadly weapon. Minassian deliberately chose a mid-sized van. He told the rental company he needed the vehicle to move out of college. Just in case, the company's staff checked Alek's background in their database, but found no suspicious details about the university graduate. That day, Alek approached the administrator's desk, received the keys to the rented van, and asked the woman working there to show him how to start the engine. The rental company employees laughed at Alek because it was the first time a customer couldn't start the vehicle on their own. Alek sat in the van for about 20 minutes, replaying his plan in his head over and over. His hands were shaking as he pulled out his phone and posted on social media, writing that the incel uprising had begun. "I will overthrow all the Chads and Stacys. Long live the supreme gentleman Elliot Rodger." Then Alek started the van and confidently drove out of the rental company's parking lot. The white van drove past the university where Alek studied and headed toward Yonge Street in Toronto's Northern District. On Monday, April 23, 2018, the weather was nice. People were strolling along the street, enjoying their lunch break. Yonge Street is one of the busiest streets in Toronto. It's home to many restaurants, retail stores, and other establishments. There was a movie theater, a shopping mall, several pharmacies, a fast food restaurant, and hardware stores. In short, it had just about everything. Yonge Street had very wide sidewalks, so it was always full of pedestrians. That day, people were going about their daily routines, shopping, grabbing a bite, or walking with their kids. It was an ordinary weekday, but soon everything changed because at 1:24 p.m., Alek drove onto Yonge Street in the rented white van. It all started when Minassian ran a red light at a very busy intersection. He honked at other cars to get them to yield. Then he quickly swerved onto the curb and drove onto the sidewalk. It was a wide pedestrian path crowded with people. Alek pressed the gas pedal and crashed into a large group of people, injuring several and, unfortunately, instantly killing one of them. But Alek didn't stop there. He pressed the gas pedal again and continued driving along the sidewalk, hitting everyone he could. At that moment, people further down the street realized what was happening. Naturally, mass panic broke out. Complete chaos erupted, pedestrians screamed and shouted, trying to flee to safety. They were literally jumping out from under the wheels of the rampaging incel, speeding along the sidewalk. Other drivers on the road watched the white van in horror, completely unsure of what to do. Some ran to help the injured, some pulled distracted pedestrians off the sidewalk, and others just stood and watched, unable to grasp the tragedy of the situation. Alek Minassian kept moving at high speed, hitting everything in his path. He knocked down telephone poles, crashed into bus stops, and then reached Mel Lastman Square, another very busy area, and crashed into a crowd of people again. At that moment, emergency services were flooded with calls from eyewitnesses. On Yonge Street, where the attack began, drivers jumped out of their cars to help the injured. Bodies lay face down on the ground everywhere, and it was unclear whether they were alive or dead. The first police officer to arrive on foot at the scene tried to help as many people as possible, but it was difficult amid the complete chaos. The law enforcement officer came across a woman lying face down and tried to turn her over to check if she was alive. Unfortunately, he found no signs of life. The officer moved from one body to another, trying to provide first aid as best he could. Store and pharmacy workers brought out supplies that could be useful: bandages, medications, towels, but sadly, some of the victims could no longer be saved due to their injuries. Meanwhile, after traveling 2.5 kilometers, Alek Minassian realized his van had sustained too much damage, and the vehicle stalled. This meant the attack was finally over. However, Alek was caught up in the moment and thought about how to continue his uprising. He climbed out of the van and came face to face with a police officer. The officer immediately drew his gun, pointed it at Alek, and shouted for him to get on the ground and put his hands behind his head. But Minassian refused to comply. He reached into his back pocket, hoping the officer would think he had a weapon and shoot, thus ending Alek's life. The young man tried to provoke the officer, but he remained calm. The law enforcement officer quickly realized Alek had no weapon, so he returned to his patrol car, turned on the siren, and addressed Minassian again. But Alek hadn't committed a mass crime just to surrender to the authorities. He wanted to die a hero, so he pulled a black wallet from his pocket and pointed it at the officer, threatening to shoot. He still hoped that, in the chaos, the officer wouldn't realize it was just a wallet and would fire first. However, the detective didn't rush. He said no one else needed to get hurt, as Minassian, in desperation, shouted for the officer to kill him right then and there. The law enforcement officer remained calm and composed, keeping the suspect at gunpoint, then holstered his weapon, drew his baton, and walked straight toward Alek. That's when the young man got truly scared, raised his hands, and immediately surrendered. The officer handcuffed him and made the arrest. This happened just 7 minutes after the attack began. The entire incel uprising, led by Alek Minassian, lasted exactly 7 minutes, including the standoff with the police officer. But in that time, he managed to cause havoc and take several lives. After the perpetrator's arrest, paramedics set up an emergency medical aid station right at the scene. Bus and subway services in Toronto were completely halted that day. Businesses in the area were also forced to close. The police were concerned that this attack might be part of a larger, coordinated assault on Toronto. The authorities didn't yet know the motive for the crime, but within minutes of the arrest, everything became clear. They quickly identified the attacker by finding his social media post. Alek Minassian's face appeared in all the news, and it was revealed that he was a lonely incel. Now, emergency services had to determine how many people had been affected by the attack. It turned out that 10 innocent people died at the scene. Among the victims were Renuka Amarasinghe, a 45-year-old single mother who left behind a 7-year-old son; Anne-Marie D'Amico, a 30-year-old investment firm employee; Chol Min Chang, a 45-year-old man from South Korea who worked as a chef. Betty Forsyth, a 94-year-old Scotswoman who had beaten cancer and was loved by everyone in the community. Dorothy Sewell, an 80-year-old grandmother who was the backbone of her family. Munir Abed al-Najjar, an 85-year-old man from Jordan who had come to visit family in Canada. So-hee Chung, a 22-year-old student at the University of Toronto. Ji-hoon Kim, another 22-year-old student from Korea. Andrea Braddon, a 33-year-old aunt adored by her 4 nieces and nephews. And finally, Geraldine Brady, an 83-year-old beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. All these innocent people were living ordinary lives, and that Monday, each was going about their business. In addition to the 10 people who died at the scene, another 16 sustained serious injuries, such as concussions, spinal damage, and broken limbs that ultimately had to be amputated. These 16 people received injuries that changed their lives forever. We mustn't forget those who weren't physically harmed, but suffered emotional and psychological trauma. There were many such people. This was exactly what Alek Minassian aimed for when he got behind the wheel of the white van. After the tragedy that unfolded on the streets of Toronto, members of the incel community celebrated what Alek had done. They rejoiced that 10 innocent people had died, 8 of whom were women. Incels saw this as an achievement. They even debated how many beers to drink in honor of each woman killed. Alek Minassian was given the nickname Saint Alek, and songs were written praising his feat to be uploaded to YouTube. Throughout the interrogation at the police station, Alek acted detached and almost emotionless. He felt no remorse for what he had done and answered questions so casually, as if he were talking not about dead people, but about a bowling game where the pins unexpectedly became living men and women. In reality, Alek was incredibly proud of himself, so he calmly told the officers about his plan. The young man mentioned the 2013 Halloween party, where a group of girls laughed at his attempts to flirt with them, which served as the catalyst for everything that happened on Toronto's central streets. Alek spoke about his attitude toward girls and women, saying no one had ever shown interest in him despite being a fairly attractive, intelligent guy. Then Minassian shared the incel community's ideology with the officers, explaining who Chads and Stacys were and why they needed to be toppled from their pedestal. He admitted to having friendly correspondence with Elliot Rodger and Chris Harper Mercer and supporting their militant beliefs. Alek remained in jail awaiting trial for the subsequent months. The trial for Minassian's case began only 2.5 years later, in November 2020. The defense team argued that Alek was not criminally responsible because his autism severely distorted his perception of reality and significantly influenced his decision-making. However, this defense didn't work. It was established that Alek was very intelligent and well-developed, and his disorder in no way prevented him from making morally correct decisions. Ultimately, Alek Minassian was found guilty on all charges, including 10 counts of murder and 16 counts of attempted murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 25 years. After this heartbreaking tragedy, a memorial was erected near the street where it all happened. In the months following the attack, many people filed lawsuits against Alek Minassian and the Ryder Truck Rental Company. A chemistry professor named Amir suffered a traumatic brain injury, multiple spinal fractures, memory loss, and fell into depression as a result of the attack. He filed a lawsuit for $6 million Canadian for the damage to his health. A woman named Catherine filed a lawsuit for $3.6 million after suffering a traumatic brain injury, a collapsed lung, and fractures to her spine, pelvis, and ribs. The family of Anne-Marie D'Amico, one of the victims killed in the attack, filed a lawsuit for $1 million, intending to donate the money to the Anne-Marie Fund, which supports women who are victims of violence. Finally, a nurse named Amaria Stessa Mariam filed a lawsuit for $14 million after sustaining a spinal injury and traumatic brain injury that left her unable to move any part of her body below the neck or breathe on her own without a machine. The 65-year-old Amaria was never able to leave the hospital, and 3.5 years later, in October 2021, she died from her injuries, making her the 11th victim of this case. Incels, most members of the community, instead of working on themselves, prefer to blame others, particularly women, for their failures in their personal lives. Although violent acts among incels are rare, they don't condemn the perpetrators but praise their actions. And this propaganda can lead to tragic consequences, as in the case of Alek Minassian. It's worth remembering that people don't become incels overnight. More often than not, it's the result of a long journey filled with feelings of loneliness, worthlessness, and rejection. Young men disappointed in love stumble upon these forums and websites where they find support from like-minded individuals, where they can openly complain about loneliness and failures with girls. But in the end, it can lead to the destruction of not only their own lives, but also an open rebellion against a supposedly unjust society. This is precisely the insidious way Alek Minassian took revenge for all the wrongs, bullying, and mockery he endured. If you have finished watching, you are a real fan of true crime. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell notifications, and put the like. See you in the next video.